Hey guys, this is Ryan from MACkite. Today we've got Ben from Foil Drive with us. We're going to go over a few kind of tech tips and tricks on setting up your system. This is not a full install guide. It's not a quick start guide, but maybe a few things you missed if you, like me, ripped open your system like a kid on Christmas Day and threw everything together, rushed out into the water. I'm sure it worked great, but there are a few things you can do to make it work better and make sure that it's working well in the long term. So you want to run us through?
Yeah, sure.
Top to bottom?
A few quick things we'll talk about, like there's a lot of order of operation that is easier to set things up and also is less likely to cause damage with your gear. So things like when you're setting up the motor pod and installing the motor, taping the cable on, and then setting it all up with your actual kit on the board. There's a lot of things like the 3 little screws that hold your motor plug into your either your max or your slim. We obviously don't want to cross thread those or get them crooked, and if you've already installed all your kit onto your mast, and that's then sitting on here, it can be very difficult. This is a 25 centimeter motor, so there's a bit of space here, but if your motor's lower down here, you'll have to put this on an angle, and then you might be driving your screw in on an angle as well, and you risk cross threading your screws. So one thing that we talk about in the install video, the full install video on our website and in the quick start sort of videos, is an order of operation. So what I mean by that is get your box on your board, put your mast onto your box. Then you loosely do up the pod onto your mast so that you can still slide it up and down a little bit. And obviously we're a retrofit product, so there's lots of different masts. These no limits V2 masts are pretty straight, but there's a lot of masts that are really tapered, like your Armstrongs, your Axis, a lot of the carbon masts are very tapered. So do up the pod loosely, and then get your motor loosely sitting in the back of the pod here so that you can slide it up and down and get the right length of cable hanging out the back here, so that when it's sitting there, it all very nicely and smoothly wraps down here, and you don't have the motor pod too high and low. And you can then move this up and down a little bit because you've done it up loose to get this all right. Then you're able to then remove the motor, tighten up the pod, you know that it's in the right position. Then you can put the motor back in, do up the screws, put the motor back in, and then tape the cable all on. So there's a few things like that just to make sure you don't damage these threads for these little screws going into the housing, to make sure you get it nice and straight. Something else on that is then when you get to taping the cable, you can see here with Ryan's demo setup here, that the cable guide here that is on the back of the mast, that's holding the cable nice and straight so that you're helping the water to pass around the mast as smooth as it can, and everything's all in a straight line. We all know foiling is all about reducing drag, so keeping everything streamlined is really important. But the cable guide here, he's got it starting just below this heat shrinked area. And if you actually push this up all the way up to the pod, you don't particularly have to tape any higher than that, but that'll close up this gap here so that water's not going and closing behind the mast and then hitting another object and getting all turbulent. So very small things, but having that cable guide come all the way up just smoothens this water flow, that obviously the water is coming through here and then going straight into your propeller. So it's difficult, it's very important to get smooth, clean water flow through to the prop. And obviously a nice clean tape job like we have here, again, helps that water pass over the mast really nice and easily. We've got some things around like keeping the rotor off. You don't particularly, obviously these propellers are quite, not so much delicate, but you want them to be in good condition as well. So while you're playing with all this gear and moving everything about and doing all that kind of stuff, you can remove the rotor from the mast, pulling nice and straight directly back. Put this aside so that while you're playing with everything and getting everything mounted up, nothing can accidentally fall over. You obviously want to look after your mast as well, but leaving that off, you don't need it on there. And even when you're putting the battery in and getting all started, then you're not at any risk of the motor starting accidentally. It's totally fine to leave that off, and just before you jump in the water, carefully slide it on. Some things with the kit itself. Obviously when you go and insert the battery in and try and put the nose cone on, if the nose cone's not fitting all the way in and going all the way closed, where the gap of the nose cone before you do up your latches is not going all the way on nice and smoothly, it could mean that your battery's not all the way in, And it could also mean that there's a little bit too much grease on this O-ring and you're not need to take the O-ring out, clean the extra grease or sand or grit or anything like that that could have got in there. You don't want to be forcing these latches closed. They should be tight and should make a nice snap noise when they go together, but they really shouldn't be like forcing on them to really try and get them closed. That's when you risk breaking things. So everything should be pretty straightforward and easy to put together. Motor pods, like we talked about before, lots of different masts, different tapers. The gap here can vary a little bit by a few millimeters or fractions of an inch for you guys. So don't get too worried if there is a little bit of a gap here. Sometimes they're super tight, sometimes they're a little bit wider, especially with tapered masts as you move them up and down. Unless you've got huge, big gaping holes, there's really no issue there. And the other one would probably be, back to the motor plug again, that when you're undoing this cable, or when you're putting it on, it's very important to get this nice and square. Let's push it down nice and square using the plug itself. Now taking it out, it's obviously very tempting to just grab this cable and pull it up, but then you're actually tearing the plug out on an angle and you can damage the pins. So getting a finger under one side, and you can use close to the plug, the cable, to help you lift it out. Little wiggles backwards and forwards to try and undo that plug nice and straight. I think you've done pretty well to get this all set up and jump in the water, but there is obviously a few little bits and pieces like that that can really help you just, yeah, get in the water first. But as we said, we've got lots of videos about installing everything, so please watch those while you're waiting for your gear to ship. And yeah, you'll really enjoy your first session out there.
For sure. If you guys enjoyed this video and you've got any comments of anything that you found helpful while setting up your unit or for long-term care, feel free to drop a comment down below or reach out to us at the shop. Cheers.